Hello, my name is Mildred Towns. I'm the host and life coach of Let's Be Real About It. It's a talk show, and this show is where we can be true and we can be real about life issues. We can speak about the traumatic and devastating things that have occurred in our lives or that may be occurring right now at this present time. We will talk with people from all races, all cultures, all religions, all nationalities, because hurt, pain, devastation, and traumatic experience has the ability to affect us all. It doesn't care. It crosses boundaries. It has no respect to person. So nobody is exempt from it. So it's time that we face the truth. It's time that we be real about the truth. It's time that we face life and stop passing the buck, as it say, or the buck, as it say. It's time to stop pointing the finger. It's time to be real. It's time to be real about what's happening in your life. It's time to be real about the issues in your life, because I know you, like me, want to be delivered and want to be set free and healed. And this is your opportunity. So let's be real about life. Let's be real about what's happening in your life. Let's be real about the life situations. God bless. I want to welcome you to Let's Be Real About It, where we are real about real life issues. I am your host, Mildred T. And I have to give this disclaimer that this is a no holds barred zone, and therefore some of the contents of the show may be offensive to some, but that is not the intent of the show. So I would just want to speak briefly about my book. I want to introduce you to my book, Truth, My Closet Secrets Revealed, and my brochure, Hear Me a Cry from the Wound. You can order these by contacting me at iHeartMinistries@gmail.com. With the brochure, if anyone is considering having an abortion, please email me for a copy of the brochure before you make this final decision to abort your child, so that we can get a brochure out to you. And also, I want to give special thanks to my sponsors at J&K Style Grill, and the City of Deliverance, and an anonymous sponsor. And if this show has been a blessing to you, please consider becoming a sponsor of the show, and we'll really appreciate it. And tonight, my special guest is Bernard. And I just want to thank him for coming and being a part of the show. And Bernard, welcome to the show.
Hey, morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being a part of the show. And the topic for the show is that I'm no longer a slave to alcohol and drugs. So, Bernard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Bernard Hurd. I'm recently retired. I'm a dad. I have 7 kids, all grown-ups now. Thank goodness. I've been just busy working for the last 30, 40 years, and I've been blessed, I've been blessed.
So tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Oh, yeah. So I was born in a small town in Georgia. I was born in my grandmother's house, and it was a pretty peaceful place. It's one of the best times that I can remember in my thought process. I was born in their house, and I was blessed from jump. I had a pretty nice childhood at that point. So for me, it was great. My parents, they kind of left me there for a while. went back and forth trying to find their way. Um, it was a back and forth situation when I was younger, but in my grandmother's house, she always instilled her faith in me, faith in God and things of that nature. So, for us, it was early morning work, church every second or third Sunday. And, my life started out that way. So Jesus was always in the house.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, he was always in the house. She talked about him so much, I was looking for him, but later on, thank God, I found out who he was. But yeah, I've been blessed from the beginning.
So when you were in the third grade, your mom and dad separated. Your mom moved to Ohio. Is that correct? In the projects after the separation. Then she moved you from Georgia to Ohio with her and with your siblings. And one thing that you said, that your mom never asked your dad for anything, even though she was struggling to make ends meet. She refused welfare and helped to make ends meet. I know that you was a young child at this time, but why do you think that she refused help? And was this a burden placed upon you because she refused to help? Even at a young age, it was as though well, I'm going to ask you, was that a burden as a young child placed upon you?
At that point, it didn't seem like a burden. It seemed like, I just wanted to help my mom. I didn't want to be a burden. So anything that my mom asked me to do, I pretty much tried to do it. Of course, she worked really hard. She wouldn't accept welfare. When we moved to the projects, most of the people around were telling her, you don't have to go to work. You can go downtown. They'll give you this and that. They'll give you food stamps. And for some reason, she wasn't about that. She got a small job. She had 3 kids. She made $50 a week. And she learned how to live with it. I don't know if it was because of the way she was brought up or whatever, but she struggled with that. And she wouldn't accept the welfare system, like a lot of the neighborhood did at that time. So, this is the way we lived. And by her working so hard, she wasn't home a lot. So a lot of that responsibility was on me. We looked out for each other, and the whole neighborhood looked out for, they looked out for us at the time. The neighbors across the street, they knew my mom. We kind of went back and forth, and everybody kind of looked out for each other. So it was that type of neighborhood at the time. So I pretty much got up and went to sleep doing what I wanted to, even at an early age. I didn't have some of those boundaries that kids did, other than the lady across the street, like, I'm gonna tell your mama, something like that.
Because back in the day, during that time, you were kids in the neighborhood. Everybody knew everybody. They knew everybody's parents. They knew the kids, who they belonged to. And so they had permission to whip your butt. They had permission to do whatever needed, because when the parents out of the home, these neighborhood parents were your parents. And believe me, they will tell on you, get your butt whooped, So back in the day, that was like the neighborhood thing, that the neighbors watched after each other kids, But you made the statement that your dad was a functioning alcoholic. Talk about how that affected you. And you also made the statement that your dad never wanted to advance in life. So that's 2 different questions. So talk about that.
Well, my dad, he was an alcoholic, functioning alcoholic, got up every day, went to work. And before my mom left him, he just didn't want to advance. We had a small apartment, and she had 3 kids. I was his only kid. So he didn't want to advance in the situation, to uplift our situation. So she wound up leaving him. Uh, his alcoholism is genetic, and later on I found out, by putting alcohol in my mouth for the first time. It started out as fun, turned into a nightmare. But yeah, he was good. I had access to him whenever I wanted to hang out with him or whatever. But that's who he was. He lived that way, and he died that way. And he was happy with it from the beginning to the end. I had opportunity to talk about it with him later on in life, but that's who he was. So my mom set out on her own so she could try to upgrade our situation. Being a kid, like I said, the neighborhood pretty much raised me. That saying about a village, takes a village to raise a kid. The neighborhood raised me. So these are the people that my life evolved from. From the guy across the street that drove trucks, to the coolest guy on the block that wore the best clothes, in town, to you name it, and these are the people that I learned how to live off of.
So you began to hustle at a very young age, and you said that you took your first drink at the age of 11, and you said that from the time you took that drink at the age of 11, you never stopped drinking. And you talked about you drink Boone Farm apple wine. Now, the millennials, they don't know anything about Boone Farm. They like that. What is it called? Grey Goose. Is that what it's called? Grey Goose or whatever it's called. They don't know about going to no 7-Eleven and buying Boone Farm and Mad Dog 2020. They don't know about that stuff. People our age know about that stuff.
Yeah, you could get a bottle of Screwdriver already in the bottle mixed. Yeah. But, as a kid, when I took my first drink, it I liked it immediately, had that burn in your chest, and, it made you feel big and strong and fearless, and it was a feeling that I liked, and I continued it. Yeah. So, we snuck around doing that as kids, and it eventually it evolved, so. Yeah, it was. I didn't know at the time that my bloodline, was filled with men that were alcoholics. My dad, he was a functioning alcoholic. My uncle, he was an alcoholic. They lived in it, and my uncle died that way at an early age. So. And my first drink, I didn't know that, I was on my way. So yeah, I didn't realize what a hold it had took over. It had took on me at such an early age. And
and just from that first drink. So by junior high school, not only were you drinking, you started selling weed in school, and talk about how with the drinking and the selling weed and all this stuff, how did it affect your education?
Well, looking back on it, it was negative. The things that I liked to do, it was fun. The harder subjects were even harder because I couldn't stay focused, The hard things like math and some of those other things, the things I liked, that they weren't a problem because they were easy, of course. But some of the harder subjects, I couldn't stay focused. So yeah, it affected my situation, and even in grade school, like junior high, I think it all affected my situation. I realize now, looking back, that I would have did much better if I hadn't have been drinking and using. So, yeah.
So you made the statement too that you never had anybody to bounce off. Therefore, you learned to do bad things from the neighbors, like you had no role model. So how important is it? We're gonna say for young guys, because especially young Black guys, they're so stereotyped now. So how important is it that our young Black guys have role models in their life to bounce off? You said you didn't have that, not even with your dad, but somebody in their life to bounce off, because I feel that that's so important. That would help them to stay on track and to keep them walking in the right direction, because some of them get so off track, they end up in jail, end up in prison, some serving life sentences for something that if they would have had somebody in their life to help guide them, that maybe they wouldn't have gotten to the point to where they are right now.
Yeah, well, being pigeonholed in small neighborhoods like that without a father figure in the house, I think it's important that you do have two parents. So many people in our situation didn't. So you're more susceptible to the negativity of these neighborhoods. Me, for one, I learned from some of the good people around me. I also learned from some of the bad people around me. People I wanted to be like and people I didn't want to be like. So I was a good kid inside, but I was taught some bad things on the outside. Like some of those hustles in the street that got you in trouble, like selling drugs for profit, so-called. Most of those things that I did, I knew they were wrong, but I didn't have nobody like, oh, don't do that, don't do this. My mom, she was kind of busy, and she didn't see a lot of the things that were going on around me. But yeah, it's so important for kids, to be able to have somebody to surround themselves with good people. It's so very important. I know later on here in LA, we created mentoring programs, for some of the inner city kids that had never been off their block. You know what I mean? And one of my jobs, was to expand their horizons. I picked these kids up from their mama's porch, and they gave them to me. Can I take your kid? We want to take them to Big Bear. They'd never seen snow before. They were 15 minutes from the beach and never seen the water.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. So we formed an operation, me and some of my neighbors, called Operation Wake Up, and it was to wake up the community to these kids. So yeah, it's real important, and we were some of the people that these kids could go to. Not necessarily for the gang guys, but for the ones that didn't want to be in them,
Mm-hmm.
And that gave them an opportunity to have somewhere to go that was safe, that was positive. And it's so important for these neighborhood men, so-called men, to step up and support these kids. So.
You made another important statement. You said your mom got remarried. You moved to a different neighborhood, but the change didn't change you. Because so many times, we change to territories or different locations. But if the change doesn't take place within us, what we're trying to escape from follow us to the next place, because it's us that needs to change. So talk about that.
Yeah, my mom was was she was a church goer, and God later on blessed her. You know, she went through her situation, and He blessed her. He blessed her with a better job, and a man came along, and he married her, and we moved into this big nice house and in a nice neighborhood, and we had new cars, and all of those things came. But at this point, my bad habits moved with me. Especially the drinking situation got me in trouble. When I got in high school, finally got my driver's license. They had an extra car. I was sneaking it out when they went to work. They found out. They wound up letting me have it just to keep me out of trouble. Yeah. So, I'm driving drunk. I'm expanding my horizons. I'm creeping to different neighborhoods and getting into more mess. So, the new neighborhood didn't change my old bad habits. The drinking increased. So I was not. Let's just say I wasn't the favorite person in the neighborhood.
You did bad things in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I was one of those guys that the neighbors was like, "Oh my God, here they come with that loud noise in the car." And, I'm creeping with big hats on, with the white wall tires like this, and it was that time of year. This is early 1970s. We Curtis Mayfield and super flying around and trying to be cool and stuff like that. And that introduced me to a whole different ball game. Now I'm hanging in clubs and getting into more negativity and newer drugs and just hanging out with the worst of the worst. And I'm going to school like this, and my mom was like, "Oh, please go to school. Every time you don't go, it causes me a problem." She was like, they were like, "Well, don't come back without your parents," and she was like, "Okay, I already went to school. I'm tired of going to school. Would you please just go to school?" So I didn't want to disappoint her, so I promised her I would go to school. So
I know that you said too that when you was dealing drugs, that some of the neighborhood people told you that you need to get a lawyer. So you just go down and you just find your lawyer hanging out, just find your lawyer. So that if you ever got in trouble, that lawyer will be available to get you out. And also, do you think that by this time that you would consider yourself to be an alcoholic, just like your dad was an alcoholic and just like your uncle was an alcoholic? So you was an alcoholic at an early age. So talk about that real quick.
Yeah, well, I still didn't consider myself being an alcoholic, because at this point, drinking and getting high and all these other things, these are fun things. We woke up looking forward to this type of stuff. By 12 o'clock, we had something in our mouth. We start out the day. So if it was, we'd go to school and we hit the top of the hill at school. We was drinking or using something before we even got out of school. Half the time, I would go to school and leave halfway. I would drive my car down the bottom of the hill, so they would call me, "Mr. Hurd, would you get your car to the teacher's parking lot?" And I would leave, and I wouldn't come back. But yeah, it was a progression. And some of the bad guys that were successful at it, these are the guys that taught me, like, look, before you hit these streets like this, you need to get you a relationship with a lawyer, dude. So I went downtown and I found me this little Jewish guy right across from the courthouse. His name was Calvin Prim. This was back in 72. And I walked in his office and I told him I needed a lawyer. And he was like, okay, what do you need? And I said, I don't know yet. You know, and I gave him some money and I left. So every time I had some spare change, I would go down there and give him some money, not knowing that one day I was gonna have to call him. You know? And when I called him, he showed up. You know, I was selling weed one day. The cop pulled me over. I had weed all over the floor of the car. They took my car and they took me to jail. And I was half high anyway. You know, I was like, I'll be out by daylight. You know, and they took me to jail. And I called my lawyer, and sure enough, there he was. You know, so I developed a relationship with this guy. You know. And these guys today, they do all these things and don't do those type of things. Get you a lawyer.
Listen at you. Tell them to get a lawyer. Get a lawyer in advance because you're going to jail. So get you a lawyer. Start paying him in advance.
I called him before I called my mama. You know, and yeah, you know, one day it got to the point. Well, I was out of the house. Didn't get along with my stepdad at this point. You know, he was kind of abusive. You know, not physically abusive to my mom, but mentally abusive. You know, so once we peeped his whole card, he was ready for us to get out of the house anyway. You know, so. One day I told him, you know, he's like, oh, go out and write the leaves. And I'm like, Adams are your leaves, so you write those. And then if you want to do the house rules, then you're going to have to leave. And I was like, thank you. You know, and I thanked him for what he did. And I said, you know, F you for what you didn't do, you know. And I left. You know, I had a 63 Chevrolet and all my stuff fit in the trunk. And that's when I hit the street, you know.
So we're gonna talk about that part right there when we come back from part 2. So I want to thank you for being my guest today, and I am looking forward for part 2, so you can finish up your story and talk about recovery, because it's so important, you know, that the people know how you recovered and how you came out on top and how you have survived recovery for a long time that you know have recovered. So I want to thank you for coming and being a guest tonight. And I just want to say to everyone who watched the show nationally and internationally, thank you, because it's just so many to try to name them all. So I just want to thank you for watching the show. And I would like to hear from you. So please email me at iheartministries@gmail.com to let me know in what Cedar State that you are viewing the show. And please leave your comments and subscribe to the channel, to the YouTube channel, and watch us on Facebook Live as well every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until next week, let the peace of God reign, rule, and abide in your hearts. I am Mildred Towns. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.